Hey everybody, Rich Monroe here with B&B Investing Group. Thanks for jumping on this week. I'm truly super excited to have a friend of mine on. Rachel Gainsbrugh is the expert and the midterm rental queen with short-term rental gems. And so I'm delighted to have her on. It's been a long time coming. She's right here in Peachtree City, not too far from where I'm based. And so we cross paths every now and then at a lot of these different conferences, but I'm happy to dig in today and have you on, Rachel. Introduce yourself and let's get started with a little bit about your background and how you got started.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rich. Rachel, I am a little girl from Haiti. Started off there. Was raised in the inner city of Miami. Did the thing, listened to mom and dad, went on, got the doctorate, but sadly, that came with a lot of student loan debt. I'm talking to the tune of about $500,000 in student loans. And I realized at that moment, you know what? I'm going to have to do something, right, to change that trajectory because that seemed like an insurmountable amount of debt. So I started to leverage the Dave Ramsey situation, the debt snowball, and started to make
Mm-hmm.
some traction, but eventually determined, you know what, I really need to do something where I am able to make money, quote unquote, while I sleep, which is a quote that I heard from Warren Buffett, where he said, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. So I was working 14-hour shifts when I heard that. And I said, you know what? I've got to find something. And so I took off my Dave Ramsey hat, put on my bigger pockets hat, and started to learn more and more about real estate investing. And I realized quickly, you know, with the long-term rental strategies, the burrs, the fix and flips, that I would need dozens and hundreds of doors to get to the number that I was looking for until I found short term rentals and started off doing short term rentals, stumbled upon midterm rentals back in 2018. And I haven't looked back since. I'm doing a hybrid version now, and it's amazing. We're about 21, 22 properties in that we primarily own. We manage just about a couple of them. Two are managed, and one is arbitrage for such a time as getting a contract and no properties in sight. So we leverage arbitrage every now and again, but that's pretty much the portfolio, what it's looking like. I am a mom. I've got two boys, a whole husband, and so one is going to college. One of my boys are. So super, super busy. But I found the midterm rental to be that thing where you have a pocket of rest, a little breathing room in between the
Yeah,
hustle and bustle of short-term rentals. So we love it.
very cool, very cool. So the student loan debt is a result of you being in the medical profession, right? And
Yes.
are you
Yeah. So
still
I've,
doing
I've
that
got
as
a
well or no?
doctorate. I,
Yeah.
I no longer practice. I retired from that back in 2023. Yeah. Or was it 2022? It's been about a year, year and a half, I believe.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, so
Yeah.
my family is in the medical field. So my dad's a general surgeon. My mom used to be an
Yeah.
RN, and I kind of experienced a lot of that secondhand. Everybody in our family eats super fast because that's in the medical profession. You have a little time to eat, so it
You're
kind of
on
got that part
call.
got
Like,
passed on. Right.
let's go.
you know, yeah. So I've been exposed to that environment through my parents. But so when you got started, you said you started with short-term rentals first.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Just for me, Rich, the numbers made more sense. And for me, as a woman, a busy
Mhm.
professional, I didn't look to have 20 properties in my portfolio. I was thinking to myself, what if I had like two really well positioned properties, just two, right? To start off. And
Yeah.
that made all the difference in the world. So short term rentals, the returns on that and the cash flow on that blew everything else out of the water from a real estate investing strategy. And so I went all in on short term rentals because of the returns.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it was a light bulb moment for me about 9 years ago, and I was kicking my long-term tenants out right before the holidays because they didn't pay the rent, having to
Mm,
rehab again, and just the numbers like it's not making sense. And so when I started short-term rentals, the same thing. I'm like, I'm all in. I'm not doing long-term anymore. It doesn't make any sense. Um, so when you started short-term, what kind of property was that? Was it were you doing like a house hack or was it a investment property?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I remember driving down to Alabama. I had gotten a really good deal from a wholesaler, and I saw this property, Rich. You wouldn't believe it. It had this green, like lime paint on it. The sun was glistening like perfectly. The leaves were beautiful. Like everything was just pure perfection. And as I'm driving down to Alabama for our very first deal, this house, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, all of our hopes and dreams laid upon the shoulder of this one property. And I kid you not, as I'm pulling up, I'm like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. This looks like the hood where I grew up in Miami. Meanwhile, not having a ton of experience with wholesalers, I'm texting him. I'm like, "Are you going to meet us here?" He's like, "Oh no, I'm in New Jersey." So did hardly any due diligence. But thankfully, I was driving there. That's a little bit of due diligence, am I right?
Right. Yeah.
And I had convinced my husband, who was kicking and screaming, by the way, who's a forever cheerleader, but he will kick and scream through it all, convince him how this is our ticket. This is our ticket. So we're pulling up. He's trying to get out the door to go knock on the door, get out the car to go knock on it. I'm like, no, don't knock, turn around, make a U-turn right now. And for me, that was the line in the sand for me. At that point, I determined, you know what? I'm not the fix and flipper girl. I could barely paint straight. My husband and I are both mathletes. We're academics. We don't have a history of construction work. We don't have that support system. We don't have a team. So for me, I determined what type of investor I was going to be at that moment for that season. So instead of the We Buy Ugly Houses crowd, which I was following along, I'm going to be more of a We Buy Pretty Houses crowd, something that needs a little lipstick. I had a high level understanding that if I had to replace a roof, it would be around 10K. And there's a team that could come and install something like that over the course of 3 to 4 days. And something like that is palatable for someone who had a full-time job. Again, my husband and I were working full-time overtime. So I didn't have the capacity to manage a whole team. And my time was better served doing a good job at my W-2 so that I can get some of these loans, mortgages, at really discounted rates. As opposed to me fighting for my life, door knocking, driving for dollars, fixing and flipping. All of that is phenomenal. But for me, I needed to find something that is nearly turnkey that I could turn on within the next 30 days. And so I took that same $17,000, and in my neighborhood in Peachtree City, there's a 4 bedroom, 3 bath for sale for $290,000. There's a lender in one of the credit unions that was willing to give me like a 5% down loan for an investment property back then. And I took that same $17,000 and we launched a short-term rental with those funds. And so I could have paid cash with 17,000 for a property that completely dilapidated. I failed to mention it looked like caulking was holding it together. The roof had caved in. It was like so much work beyond my wildest dreams. But I know you have a lot of fix and flippers in this community. They're like, "Oh, Rachel, I smell money." I get it, but it's right. But for someone like me, where I needed something to start working within 30 days because I had a doubting husband, I needed him to see, the dream that I had, and now he runs operations for our business. He's completely bought in. But that was the first property, Rich.
Very cool. And so on that 4 bedroom, what were you averaging a night in terms of revenue? What was the night?
Oh, that's a great question. I know over the month we were at 6,000 a month. What would that be per night?
Oh, okay. Well, no, that's good enough. That gets to where I was going. So 6,000 a month in revenue, and your debt service on it was how much?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. What did you say, Rich?
How much was your debt service each month?
Debt service each month was about $1,200 for the mortgage, and then another $300 to $400 for the expenses. So not too shabby, right?
Not for the first one. That's a nice net income each month. for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so what was interesting,
So
that property, it actually was being sold under value. The owner had passed away. The trustee, the son lived out of state in South Carolina, and there was a leak in the roof, and everyone, I was number 8. This was Saturday where I saw the property in Alabama. On Sunday, I found this property in Peachtree City. And I was number 8 on the list of wanting to put in an offer. Everyone had concessions. They wanted this, that, and the other done before they, move forward. I said, no concessions. I knew this property, this market, that house could have demanded a purchase price of 350, 400 easily. So at 290, I was like, are you kidding me? But it's because I had a relationship with that particular market. So for me, that was like, oh my gosh, this is no
yeah.
brainer. Walking distance from my house. So for me, it was great.
Oh, very cool. That's a great first one. So
Mhm.
what started the transformation and kind of moving over into the midterm rental? What kind of triggered that process? Because I know that's kind of your core specialty now, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Specifically in the suburban market. For me, I actually stumbled into midterm rentals. My very first midterm rental was a film industry client, and I've shared this story multiple times on a variety of podcasts, but I got a really big booking for the film industry. And then my second midterm rental booking was from the insurance companies. So all of us who have homeowners insurance, there is a protection inside of our plan, more than likely, where if our home is completely destroyed due to an accidental disaster or due to a natural disaster, there's an allowance. We have an allowance available for us so that we can stay in another home or another place, and it will pay month after month after month. And so my very first experience with this was one of our properties were listed on AL. No, this was listed on Airbnb. I believe it was on Airbnb, and it was a property we're in the process of selling, our own personal home that we're about to sell. We had taken out half of the furnishings, and all of a sudden we got an inquiry for another property of ours. And they asked, well, and that property was booked. That first property was booked. And then they asked, well, do you have any other properties? And so to me, that started the paradigm shift that the midterm rental guest doesn't need to be as exact as your short-term rental guest. You know how short-term rentals, that laser
Yeah.
blue sofa is got to be that laser blue, like
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
see in the photos is what they get. But when I
Right.
mentioned to her, yeah, no, that property's not available anymore, she says, well, do you have any others? Like, who has other properties in their back pockets, right? And so I thought, hey, we're all adults here. Let's have a conversation. And in that market, the expectations of long-term rental, uh, 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 I want to say guest, but tenant, a long-term rental tenant would pay about 17, 1800,000, $1,800 a month. And so I said, well, possibly, would you be willing to pay 4,000 a month for it? And she said, yes, just like that off the bat. I was like, wait, that was a little too quick. I said, wait, did you say there were pets? What about $5,000 a month? She
There
said,
you
yes,
go.
so quick. Oh, wait, did you said that like we had a little accessory dwelling unit situation? Oh, do you need that too? We ended up at $11,000 a
Oh,
month
I love it.
for
Awesome.
13 months just because I couldn't figure out what the ceiling was, and it
Yeah.
was too quick of a yes. And I was like, wait, you're moving too fast. So
So their budget was probably like 18,000 a month or something crazy, right? So
something crazy like that. For a
yeah, very
five-bedroom
cool.
house. And so I look at
Yeah.
my brother, my husband, and the movers. I was like, hey, wait, hello there. Do you mind moving the furniture back? Not a fan. They were not a fan until they saw the numbers and they were like, oh, okay. And so we ended up holding on to that property for a longer, and they booked with us for a month. But I'm going back now, understanding that and for the audience who's here, whenever someone tells you it's fire damage, the expectation, although they may book for a month, go ahead and block your calendar out for the next 8 to 9 months, if not 11 to 13
Absolutely.
months, right? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
be a little bit proactive with midterm rentals. You don't want to be reactive and get shocked. And now you've got all these
Yeah.
2-night bookings peppered all over your calendar. Be proactive. Think about, who it is that you're serving. And so for fire damage, 8 months and beyond. For water damage, I would say 5 months and beyond. And that continues to extend because we have supply chain issues. We have contractors, sadly, that are not showing up to the, job. We have permitting office delays and so on and so forth.
But this is the one instance in real estate where we love the delays with the midterm rentals, because it just means more money for us and more consistency for us, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I welcome the delays, but I'm also under construction on a property, and I'm losing hair off of the delays.
Yeah, so it's not good on the other side, but
No.
only on the. So let's jump into, that's a good segue, I think, into how you're able to balance operationally between and pivot between short-term and midterm on your properties. You mentioned blocking the calendar when you kind of know that you've got a guest that's going to probably more than likely extend. But how are you able to kind of make sure that you're not missing out, and being able to take advantage of both options?
Yeah, so it's really dicey, especially with Airbnb and all of the implementation of their AI. I will tell you how I have done it. This is probably not the most, I know this is being recorded. This is probably not the most kosher way of doing it going forward. But what we have done is leverage a duplicate listing, and we leverage that via different accounts. So I have a midterm rental listing and a short-term rental listing. And so it's again understanding who it is that you're serving, who is looking for that midterm rental product. In my suburban markets, my top priority are my midterm rentals. They come above all other guest types or guest avatars. And my touristic markets, it's going to be short-term rentals, right? Obviously, hopefully that's obvious, like the beach markets or the mountain or the amusement park markets. Those are primarily short-term rentals, except for when you're in your slow season or your shoulder season, then you want to start looking and mapping out your plan for midterm rentals. So yeah, my priority is having that one midterm rental listing that's available. And I keep it open, wide open. I want to have the conversations. I use it as a marketing tool. I want to see who's coming to the area. What are they coming from? That's how we discovered we have a lot of construction teams coming to the area for the pipeline and for the they're drilling somewhere and there's a data center, so it's the guests that are informing me a little bit better than, my own due diligence and my own research of what's going on in the community. So I have that one listing that is a 30-day minimum. I keep it as open as possible. And what it says to everyone is like, we're open for business. And say someone reaches out to me and I don't have anything available. Well, I have a network, a community of individuals who have properties that I can pass those deals along to, or if it's worthwhile, I will leverage an arbitrage, which is a rent for rent model, which I did for a $16,000 a month booking. I'm not going to let that go by the wayside, right? But had I not had that listing that's available that say, hey, we're open for business, I wouldn't know that there was a need there. Now for my short-term rental listing, although yes, it is for short-term rentals, we leverage tools like Price Labs. Okay, Price Labs is a dynamic pricing tool. And within that actual listing, there's a way that you can automatically allow the length of stay to be updated and to be incentivized closer to today's date. So today is October the 24th. Say I get a guest that's checking out today. And so for the next 10 days, it's open season. Anyone can book for 2 nights, all that. But beyond the 10 days, now we have a far out premiums that I apply to de-incentivize those shorter stays. And it just follows the calendar along. So it's like stay restrictions. So if you want 2 nights now, you can have it now all day, every day. But if you want 2-night bookings on December the 3rd, you're not gonna get that, So
So what you're doing by that is avoiding having any, odd stuff far out into the future that prevents you
Yeah.
from booking somebody for 2 or 3 months because you got that two-night stay that's 60 days from now. So that makes sense. So let's back up. Let's back up a minute and kind of unwind some of the other stuff, because I also tried the separate listing, and I did it on one of my lake properties, and I kind of got a little bit, because usually when I do a separate listing like that, I like tying the calendars together. But what you're saying is don't do that, and I actually did that by mistake, and I had a week long stay in one of my lake houses, and somebody booked instant booking, and that's probably my mistake, for like a $30,000 month. And so I was in the process of, well, hey, let me try to cancel the 7-day, but the people were already there, so I was like, I couldn't kick them out. So it was this big scrambling event. But I think there's I think I understand what you're saying. So your other listing is a 30-day open for business. It's not an instant booking, but you can take inquiries that help you make decisions on where to place them.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay.
100%. Yeah, turn off Instabook. Thank you for highlighting that. Turn off Instabook for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Because you definitely will get some conflicts that'll happen if you don't do that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So beyond those two things, is there any other gem that you would throw out there in navigating both strategies at the same time?
So I was on a call earlier with Price Labs, and I was just asking them some behind the scenes questions, like how can we optimize midterm rentals using Price Labs? And they shared some really good gems around orphan gap day stays. And so say you get a 28-day booking, and then 14 days later, you get another 28-day booking, and say that calendar is a 28-day minimum. So that 14 days in between is not going to get taken into consideration because your listing is for 28-day minimums. And so optimizing the orphan day stay is definitely one thing that they mentioned to me. That was great. I want to revisit that to make sure we're up to par. Our occupancy, thankfully, has been really, really good, but I know someone may need to hear that. And the other thing that they mentioned to me, and they do trainings every day, which I think is really cool, is setting up a seasonal profile. So if you've got these 2 peak seasons where you get a lot of traction and then you're slow, or you're in that shoulder season in between, you want to set up kind of a seasonal profile that will really optimize the 30-day minimums during that slow or shoulder season. So I thought those were really good tips that I know personally I'm going to be implementing very soon, just to make sure that all my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed. Even in the touristic markets, you've got the highs and lows for sure. So keep that in mind. I'm always looking to learn. For me personally, I will say one gem from a call. I was in a mastermind, Go Abundance mastermind call today. I got the question of what type of, do you have a midterm rental lease agreement? So just want to give everyone a heads up. I use the local NAR, state of Georgia, long-term rental leases. That's what I use, a long-term rental lease agreement. And then I have little red line items, such as the person that's staying in the property is not the person paying me. It's the company that's paying me, number one. And the company has the authority to give me to request extensions, provide the notice to extend, and the notice to vacate. So those are 2 things that I add. So I'm using the state specific lease, and they're available in all 50 states. So just wanted to, just in case anyone else was thinking of that.
So real quick, Rachel, not to interrupt, but while we're on that topic, so how on midterm rentals, how are you navigating eviction laws and people that don't pay, and how does that impact the midterm, if at all, in terms of being tied up with those eviction processes that the long-term rental space has to deal with?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The way that I mitigate risk is by understanding who it is that's renting from me. So I only host the homeowner. So if it's a renter coming from a landlord situation that's devastating. Sadly, I don't accept those individuals. Somebody's going to come for me,
Mhm.
Rich. I don't know. Don't come for me. I'm sorry. I only
Well, you're
host
running a
the
business over there, so you can't open the doors. You got to make decisions that are better for you and your business, not for them. So
yeah.
that makes sense. Right.
Exactly. And so think about the avatar that we're hosting. So number one, we love a homeowner who's coming from our neighborhood, the neighborhood where their property is. Their home is going to be much better than mine after the renovations are done. Like they're not looking to squat in my property, you know? So
Yeah. Right.
knock on wood, right? I'm going to say, oh, that wouldn't happen, but then knock on wood.
Yeah.
They've that's never happened to me. They're not looking to squat in
Right.
my property because their home is literally being fully renovated, and so that's number one. Number two, the film industry. If it's the executive director of The Walking Dead and she wants to squat in my house, have at it. I'm a big fan, so let's go. That's number two. Number three, my construction workers, they want to get in, and they have another project in Oklahoma. They're in and they're out. So
Yeah.
I'm not really navigating any
And
of
that
those
is a risk.
landlord eviction situations.
Right.
Never have I ever. So you want to
Right.
speak to it, Rich? What have you seen? Because I've never.
No, so knock on wood as well. I've been very fortunate. I mean, you do
Yeah.
hear, and you've recently heard some horror stories about people squatting in Airbnbs in other states. I think I've seen in the news maybe one time in Georgia, but we do a lot of additional vetting for our guests,
Yeah.
even if they're on Airbnb. So that kind of prevents and mitigates a lot of the risk as well. We've got minimum age requirements. We require in some cases that they upload their ID and a selfie, and we do a lot of that stuff up front, which
Yeah.
if somebody sees my listing and it says in there crystal clear that we do require further verification in order for you to book, a lot of times they just move on, which is great if they're trying to do something that they shouldn't be doing. So we've been
Yeah.
very fortunate with not having any issues with that at all as well. So
And there's
and if we
something.
do, we've
Oh,
got
go ahead.
if we do, we have an armed security service that'll come extract them from the property. So
I love that. I love that. No, no, no. These are great tools that we're giving, that you can add to your tool chest for sure. And there's something about money, right? Like money solves a lot of problems. So I take a nice deposit. A lot of times I have a
Mhm.
refundable and a non-refundable deposit. My non-refundable deposit is pretty small, but Rich, once you get back into that house after it's been lived in for 30 and 60 days, there are little dings, and little paint,
Mhm.
touch ups and light bulbs, so that non-refundable is like 500 to 1500 depending on the size of the property. We
Yeah.
collect that every time, and that help keeps our operating costs down for sure. And then
Right.
that is the non-refundable, but the refundable, people want their $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 back, $14,000 back. And if they start to misbehave
Yeah.
and they know you're holding their money hostage, that becomes a problem
Yeah.
as well. So I encourage you, if you can squeak in a deposit, sometimes we
Right.
can get it, sometimes we can't, depending on what's going on with the insurance and their policy. It's
Yeah.
really helpful as well.
One of the other things that we do, which thanks to my wife, my wife always comes up with these gems in our business. I always have to give her credit for when I talk about them. So
Shout out to
and
Marva.
you might already be doing this, but it's a mandatory requirement on our longer stays, especially longer than 15 days, that we have a cleaning crew come in at least once every 2 weeks. So if someone's there for 90 days, I'm going to bake that cost in, and it's mandatory. So I'm not waiting for the guest to pay for it. It's upfront understood. And every 2 weeks, I got my cleaners in there. We've got our eyes on the property, and we're maintaining the bathrooms and the kitchens. Because for 90 days, if someone's in there and they're not keeping up with stuff, it can get pretty nasty pretty quick. So I'm not sure if you do that as well.
100%. It's mandatory, it's required, and it gives our cleaners an
Yeah.
opportunity to spy a little bit, let us know that everything's
Right.
okay, because we're not long-term landlords, right? We got to protect the
Right.
asset and make sure it's in tippy-top shape for the next guest. So yeah.
Exactly. There's a reason why we are not long-term landlords. We don't want to have those headaches, and that's one way to be proactive to avoid it. Right. So
100%.
I didn't want to. I interrupt you earlier going through your hit list. I don't want to miss out on
Yeah.
anything else you have.
Yeah.
Gem list.
So visibility is key, right? People are saying, well, you know what? I've been waiting around for a midterm rental booking. I haven't, gotten any bites. I would say visibility is key. And the number one way that we tank our visibility, we've already addressed it. Your calendar is out of sync, no offense. But if I go in your market right now and I look for a property for the next 30 days, starting like October the 30th, 30 days, if you have 2-night bookings peppered all over your calendar, you will not be found. And believe it or not, the guest is looking on Airbnb for a property themselves. If they're type A and picky like me, the insurance is looking on Airbnb irregardless. They've been told not to, but sometimes they have no choice. So visibility is key, and making sure you have something, some digital footprint in the marketplace to let people know, hey, I'm here. You're not going to get any bookings. Okay, so double check your visibility to make sure that you are out there. Yes, we list on Airbnb. Yes, we list on Vrbo. We list on platforms like Furnish Finder for like the smaller properties. For the larger properties, we list on another platform, which is paid also like Furnish Finder, called Corporate Housing by Owner, which is kind of hit or miss, but one booking covers the cost of entry. We list within the actual insurance company's platform. So ALE Solutions, that's one of them. That's the third party that takes care of the housing side of things. So if you go to ALE Solutions, you can click on list my property and list it there. Another one is My Key. They're out of Canada. They've been really, really interesting. Really, I find them interesting because they're one of the most transparent companies we work with so far. Usually we're going back and forth trying to figure out the pricing, but when they send you an inquiry with the fair rental value of 14,167, like where you stand, okay, everyone, nobody breathe. Let's get into action to grab onto it. Right? Nobody breathe.
Absolutely.
It's happening. It's happening. So I have never seen any other company, leverage that. I will say behind the scenes, I know the other companies are not happy that they're that transparent, but I'm here for it. I'm here for the tea. But yeah, so My Key, you can list yourself as a vendor. There is CRS. There is Alacrity, which used to be THD. I think they're owned by Blackstone, BlackRock now. So it's a big deal. It all starts with visibility. And I do want to share the 4 P's that Price Lab shared with me. Okay. So the 4 P's are product. Yeah. Product, place, promotion, and price. They said when it comes to marketing, you got to make sure that the product is showing that it's midterm rental friendly, that we have a second monitor. Maybe you bought a second monitor for 45 to 55 bucks. You've placed it in the home and you have a lot of remote workers. They're going to see that, right? And of course, I know you teach on so many great amenities, but think about somebody who's going to live there a little bit longer. So what is that product? Place is what they mentioned next. Place is where is it listed? And so Airbnb, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I failed to mention Zillow. Don't sleep on Zillow. Zillow is definitely a place where we get inquiries as well. And it's rare that you will find furnished properties on Zillow, so you will stand out for sure. Promotion, they mentioned not sleeping on some Facebook groups, right? Listing on some Facebook groups as well. And price, and of course, we went into a whole conversation with Price Labs, doing that seasonal type of profile so that you're giving that 30-day discount, but it's still within your wheelhouse of what you're wanting to make. So, yeah.
Awesome. Love it. A lot of gems there, guys. A lot of nuggets. Chomp all that up. So Rachel, one of the things I usually like to cover as well is what's next. What do you have on the horizon? What are your goals? Kind of, what you've got 20 some odd properties now. What's your goal for the next couple of years now?
Yeah, so we'll probably shrink down to about 18 or so. We have a few low-hanging fruit that are kind of dragging the portfolio down. So being realistic about the performance of each property. And say I have a lot of equity in one particular property, but the cash flow would take me 200 years to achieve that equity. Right?
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
I do what's called a return on equity audit, to see, okay, if I have $150,000 in equity in this property, and when all is said and done, because of a series of unfortunate events, whether it's repairs, older properties, renovations, I've only cash flowed $100 a month. That puppy's got to go, right? So
Makes
we're
sense.
reconfiguring a few things. We're grabbing some hold of our equity as much as possible. And so we're under construction right now in Rosemary Beach. We have we're looking at actually purchasing a few properties to put them together to create kind of a retreat setting situation. I love retreats, smallish retreats. So a retreat
Nice.
happens either domestically or retreat property on an island somewhere where I can really cater to our burnt out medical professionals. So that's the goal for the next few
Love
years.
it. Love it, love it, love it. Very cool. So we're running a little bit out of time as well. I know that you recently did a report, and I've just put the link in the comments there for folks to check out and be able to reach out to you as well. Why don't you let us know a little bit about 75 Gems and what that's about?
Yeah, so 75 Gems is my 2024 top 75 cities with highest profitability for short-term rentals, as well as I have a tab specifically for midterm rentals. So check it out and see if your city made the cut. If not, if you're not the top 75, you're top 100, that's okay too. But wanting to give people a starting point, Rich, I keep hearing, where do I get started? Where should I invest? So I was like, here's a report. Chew on
Love
that,
it.
like Rich would say, and let me know what you find.
Very cool. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thanks everybody for checking us out this week. I'd love to have you back again, Rachel, sometime. And we just talked about before we jumped on here. It's a shame we go across the country to speak at conferences to see each other, and we don't do anything locally. So we definitely need to get that on the calendar as well. But thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll talk to you guys. Thanks everybody this week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Rachel. Take care.